Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just kid stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can
Those
take
are
those
Fibonacci
numbers. So the
You know, like the Fibonacci sequence.
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And joining me today is the Golden One, who, yes, the Golden One. Channel is in the description and in the title. And dude, your channel, I gotta say, man, it's really inspiring. You're really bringing back the warrior spirit that you find, and when you read like Homer. And, you know, the Spartans and the Theban bands and, you know, the Gymnasium. That's what that's why I put Gymnazo on the thumbnail, because you're all about the Gymnasium. You're all about the training body and mind. That word Gymnazo is used in different contexts. The word breaks down etymologically as like naked training, like gymnos means naked. That's why the gymnosophists were the naked philosophers, that they called them the Indians, because they were like basically naked, I guess. But the gymnasium was a place in ancient Greece, in Athens and Sparta, all over the place, Thebes, where people would train, and they would train their bodies. And they would, you know, there was all types of throwing, javelins and wrestling, and they took it seriously. This was part of education. This was part of paideia. Paideia being education. Was you didn't just learn like history and mythology or whatever. You actually trained, and it was part of your education system. I mean, obviously, people, you know, we didn't have public education like we have today. This is more for, like, you know, the upper echelons of society. But you know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how good was who were the best of that time period, and what were they doing. I like to you know, look at that sometimes, and they were training training not just mind but body. So that's why, you know, I put that on the top, on the thumbnail. You also have your channel, and there's tons of stuff in there about working out, your political views, your journey, your pagan journey. You know, you're obviously from Sweden, so the Norse mythology is big to you. You're a reader of Evola. I just started reading Evola. We're going to talk about that. You have your website as well. I have a link in the description. Let me just pull that up real quick so people can see. This is, Legio Gloria. You got clothes. You got all types of stuff.
Yeah, so that's the clothing site, and then the main page is thegoldenone.se. I mainly post like book reviews there, But yeah, that's also like one of my main endeavors now. I just came back from Lithuania planning some new releases, so that's also like a central part of everything I do now, the fashion. But yeah,
man. Well, how long have you been doing this for, and how did you get started? How do you end up becoming a pagan? Because not everyone, unless maybe you were born into a pagan family. I have no idea. Tell us about all this. Like, well, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So we can begin with the pagan path. So essentially, I'm born in 89. I think you said in a comment you're the same, right?
Yeah, I was born in 89. Yeah.
It's a good vintage.
It is, yeah.
89. So yeah, basically everyone in Sweden then or even now is an atheist. So it's like been 50 years since Christianity sort of made an exit over the last century. So that hasn't really been part of anything really, except like you had some school ceremonies for Christmas at churches, but beyond that, Christianity wasn't really a part of it, and atheism and like science, that was the state religion instead, or like political correctness was the state religion. But for me, growing up, both my mother and father, they read stories. So my mother, she read like Norse mythology, so I got acquainted with that quite early on. The classical tales of Thor fighting giants and stuff like that. Father read me and my brother. I have a brother, he's 1 year older than I am. He read the Iliad and Odyssey, especially the Odyssey then, because it's fantastical and mythical. So I got a good dose of like European mythology quite early on, and that stuck with me. So that was always sort of more familiar than anything else really. Then I didn't really think all too much about it until maybe I was 25, something like that. I'd started going to the gym. Then it was more about wanting to emulate. I want to sort of look like Thor, to feel like Thor, have that power, or indeed Achilles. I was mightily influenced by Brad Pitt playing Achilles in Troy. That's why I have my hair. I've always wanted to have that hair since
nice. I wish I can do that, man.
But, yeah. So those kind of inspirations. So it was more of a like cultural, motivational thing to begin with. And then later on, maybe as I hit 30, I'm 36 now, maybe when I was like 30, I started thinking more about the metaphysical aspect of it all. So I became like, started to believe in God, like the one to hen, and the gods as metaphysical entities, because over this last 5-6 years, there have been too many occurrences for me to simply be an atheist who's only interested in the gods in like a cultural framework. So I've delved a lot deeper into it, and since I got my first taste of like magic, or whatever we shall call it, like metaphysics, then I've started to delve a lot deeper into it. So that's sort of my pagan journey, I suppose. It's always been like the archetypes, the myths, the stories, the inspiration, the aesthetic inspiration has always been there my entire life. And then over the last years, especially since I've been into politics for quite some time, I also think about atheism on a like societal level, seeing that it's not super good to not believe in any metaphysical principles, because people tend to be depressed, and it's not super fun to not believe in, to not have any gods at all. So then I approached it from that direction as well, and then from another direction, purely like philosophical for myself. So that sort of brought me more to the divine. So that's about it, the story about the pagan path. And of course, I'm still on it. I'm still learning every day. I try to, at least. So
yeah. And I was talking about the word gymnazo, and I wanted to kind of bring it back to your program, because you seem to have a really well thought out, strict, God-fearing, pious way of life. The Greeks would call that theosebes. Like, it means like the reverence for the divine, but it also is like a call to action to be pious, to be good, to have virtue. Virtue, arete, is the highest. That's what the Platonists and Stoics agreed on, was the highest thing is virtue. You should always be trying to be good. And I see you as someone who's like actively engaging in that type of lifestyle. Like you speak out against what you think are things that are evil, like porn, and things that you would disagree with in political stuff, and you care about the generation coming, the children, and you seem to have a very sort of pious worldview. And I was thinking about that word. That word doesn't. We think of gymnazo as just like strength and physical training, which it does mean that, but it also can be used for working out of the mind. And for example, here's a passage in the Epistle of Timothy, where, and I'm just going to read the English translation, then I'll look at the Greek. This translation from the NIV have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. And this part right here, train yourself. Gymnazo. It's saying gymnazo de sauton pros el sebein. And that's that word el sebea, which means like good reverence, God or godly. Like the church father Eusebius, his name literally is this word in a theophoric element, Eusebius el sebea. So basically what he's saying is train yourself like a gymnasium to have reverence for the divine. Your channel, I mean, not just your channel, just like your entire everything you're doing on Twitter, on your blogs, whatever, all the stuff you're doing, seems to have. You seem to be doing what I'm talking about. You seem to be training for not just your body, but also your mind. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. So this is one of those insights. Everyone who has been to the gym for like, a year or so, you come to this realization that you feel so much better, is overall you think better. So what I would explain it with, training in the gym, and I think strength training, MMA is also a good way to sort of approach this. But when you get into it, it's sort of like you learn a language, and then you can read. So you can read the world in different ways. So if you don't have that mindset that you gain for yourself after you sort of embark upon the iron journey, when you have the discipline, progression, you have that focused, like I was in a Nietzsche phase like 2 years ago, so I wrote an article, and I liken it to like the path to the Übermensch, like, and that path you can be in the gym. So you have your everyday, like boom, 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 like a disciplined Roman testudo is marching through the desert, and avoiding the temptation to chase after some Parthian horse riders or something, and they just keep going towards the destination. Then they take Palmyra or whatever ancient city it might be. So you gain that sort of a way to view life or to read life, and it's hard to do it without experiencing it firsthand, how your entire life sort of brings a focus to it. So I have back in my library here, I have Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima, a quite hard book to read, I will admit, but it's a quite nice book indeed. And he writes about it that when he started with, lifting weights and being out in the sun, embarking upon that sort of lifestyle, he started viewing life in a completely different way. And I think that is maybe the main thing that comes to it. So it's not about just, gaining muscle mass and to be, I say this also, like there's a practical aspect, especially since we live in Gotham City. So we live in Sweden, in the US. I mean, it's quite dangerous places both nowadays. So it's good to have a bit of brawn on you. It's good to be able to, throw a punch. But it's also even without that aspect, it's good to, on a more like spiritual level, we can talk about something like demons fear sweat. It's a quite good thing, and everyone can notice this. So if depression comes in, it's like, have you trained hard in the gym? Have you done your deadlifts this week? Have you sweated a lot in the gym? Yes or no? And usually if someone is depressed, it can actually be the case that they haven't sweated out their demons. So it's like it has a lot to do with hormonal levels as well, that you get a nice hormonal boost when you go in the gym and you get to those nice happy hormones. But it's also something else. It's about that focus, that discipline, that sense of an upwards trajectory, because after all, like, we want, as pagans also, we want to, you know, strive for the divine. If we're not going upwards, then yeah, we might go downwards, and then here are the demons of depression. They might wait for us hungrily, like sharks is coming to eat us if we don't stay afloat. So it is good to have that sort of a good focus, and that's also that can be translated into different things. So I talked about clothes. I approach the clothing as the exact same way as the gym, that how can I make this cut a bit better? Now I say I perfected this particular polo, but to just give an example, can I find a better material? Can I have a cut that is a bit better? Can I use that, or can I do this? So always better, always striving for that perfection, just taking one step at a time, and having a low time preference as well, because this is something that when you see the small results, it's actually easier to just trust the process. And then when you start to see accumulated results over time, then you realize that, yeah, it is worth sticking with it for 1 year, and then that becomes 5 years, 10 years. So it's really good if you want to sort of embark upon a longer endeavor, such as writing a book or whatever it might be, getting that, you know, sense of one day at a time, one step at a time. So essentially what I really want to say is that when you get into it and you understand how everything is connected, you can apply those teachings to basically everything else, and you will be greatly benefited by it. So the gym, it's it's not only about getting strong or whatever, it's about reading the world in a different way. And this is also, I know, our mutual friend Uberboyo, he made a really interesting video a while back about the different brain sides, that schizophrenic, they can only be like, they think more with the left side and they don't connect it, so they only look. And I know many leftists are like this. They look at me and say, oh, why do you train so much bench press? Will you ever find yourself under a big log you have to lift off from yourself? So they see it very, very detailed, without seeing the big picture. But if we then, as enlightened, you know, we have our brain sides connected, we see the world in a holistic manner, we see everything, we see the physical, the metaphysical, the spiritual, we see all of it. And then we see that when I go into the gym and I manage to put on 1 kilo extra or 1 pound extra on the barbell, doing 5 sets of bench press, that's a big victory in so many ways. Then I've overcome myself. I've taken one step on the path to the Ubermensch. And those little victories, they add up. And that brings confidence to you that, yes, I am in this situation. I can get out on top of it. And when you do this in other situations in life, that's perfect. So it's also confidence building. It's not only bodybuilding, it's confidence building, saying that, yeah, I have a process here, I have a plan, I trust the plan, and I go forward with it. So yeah, there's so many teachings to be had from the iron.
It seems to be sort of an ancient mentality to wanting to conquer nature, wanting to conquer, and maybe not conquer nature, maybe to maybe it's not necessarily conquering nature, but it's kind of like achieving what nature wants. Like the way we're created, or whatever. If you're a naturalist, we have bodies that can be improved. The fact that it seems like the most logical or rational thing to do would be to act on that, to push your body and become as healthy as you can, because that's what nature sort of is like telling you to do, if you think about it. Like when you're not eating good, or you're gain a little weight once in a while, you could feel it, and the nature will tell you that. Like you won't, you could tell. But when I've just got back in the gym recently, and I could feel way better, sleeping better. My mind is clearer. But it seems to be a mentality of that a lot of these ancient Bronze Age cultures held, was that like you're trying to push to the limit. You're trying to conquer. It's a conquering mentality.
Yeah, and something else is that when you have certain things, and this is also something you could get into in different sports as well, when you have like a sort of liminal space between. So to use an example, if we have like a heavy squat, because that's it's a quite scary lift, because you place yourself under like 200 kilos on the barbell. So there is an element of danger to it. And then you have like say if you can do one set, one repetition for 200 kilos. You don't know if you can do 210. So the space in between there, like a liminal space between certainty and uncertainty. And that stage, when you put yourself under the bar and just, I'm trusting my strength there, and it may fall on me. Hopefully you can have spotters or something, but sometimes you don't. So you just have to trust yourself, and it is a sort of leap of faith there to take. And that is also, when you take those leaps many times, it builds a certain, again, a confidence in you that you can actually overcome yourself in those moments. So that's also one of these things why I like squats. So I don't need bigger legs, like muscularly. I don't need it for anything. It's just annoying to get pants and everything like that. But I do it for two reasons. One, for the hormonal thing, that when I do heavy squats, I just feel like a beast. It feels good. And then also for that,
you feel the testosterone rushing through you after the
yes, exactly. It is like the body's like, okay, we're moving heavy weights, we're a beast, we're pushing through, we're like a big cosmic bull of some sort. So that's what we're doing. And then also that uncertainty, that you have a little bit of trepidation, you have a little bit of fear, you go under the bar, and then you manage it, and then you feel really powerful with yourself. So that's like for the squat in particular. So for me, it actually has nothing to do with back in the day. I will say that then I wanted to have bigger legs, like muscularly bigger legs, but now it's only for the spiritual aspect of it. So I just thought to mention that as well, that liminal space. You don't really know, can you make it or can you not make it? And then you find out that, I could actually make it. So,
or you find out you can't, if you can't.
If you're unfortunate, it can go really, really bad as well.
If you think about it, that's the ancient warriors. They would, sometimes they knew, okay, we outnumbered them and we had the high ground. We're going to win. We had this. And then they'll act accordingly. But then there might be some times where it's like, all right, they got the high ground and we might barely even have enough men to cover. All right, we got to do it. And then hopefully if you have it, you might get that frenzy, that like warrior frenzy going, kick yourself up a little bit. And then the opponent might not have that frenzy going. Well, now one man is like 8 men. And then you can go, now you're outnumbering them because the frenzies is so like, I don't know. I think the working out in a way is sort of like digging into your ancient warrior self and like kicking in that like sort of religious frenzy in a way. But instead of, going and, as a hoplite to go and kill the Persians, you're doing it with weights and you're trying to add 5 pounds or whatever it is,
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, if just touch briefly on the political situation, it's like the struggle now. It's not, we can't use violence because that will only play into the hands of the regime, because they will only like imprison us directly. So we have to do something else with our anger. And I know I've been angry for a long time. I fueled so many sessions with anger about the state of not only of Sweden but all of Europe, the US. You see, so many crazy news, especially like these last few weeks. And having been like red pilled for so long, it's been, a constant source of frustration. But then you can always use that, anger into something productive. And then for me, as I've used it, I've built up a good physique, so I can, showcase the physique and then attach some political views to the physique and then reach out to a big message. So it was a good use of that sort of anger, for my sake at least. And that's also why I usually say to many guys that it's not a battle as it looked back in the day. There isn't any physical opponent necessarily, although there might be, if we're out on Gotham City in the subway, you might be approached by an unsavory character and you might need to fight. But for the most part, it's about something more with a longer time frame, longer time horizon. And then it's always good to, when it comes to physical training, also to stay optimistic, because I see so many black pillars, they're doom and gloom posting saying it's over and everything. And this is always, when you have someone who is more life affirming, high thumos, he goes forward in life. He's not going to say it's over. He's going to say, yeah, let's look at the possibilities. Can we do something cool here? Can we do something? Can we conquer? That's what he will say. So the guy who squats heavy, he will be more inclined to read the world, read the situation. So if someone says, he goes around in life like this, with bad body language, he doesn't feel well, he will read the world as it's over. But the guy who is like, going forward in his own personal life, he says, yeah, I can actually do a lot more things than I thought. He will read the situation as, yeah, we're starting to get back here. Things can actually change, because he's used to changing his own reality with his mind. So therefore, yeah, I can change myself. Why can't I change the world? And that is I would say the proper mindset to have. I made a video maybe 2 years ago or something. I said I don't really like stoicism anymore, because I want unrealistic dreamers. I want a young guy to say something completely unrealistic, like Napoleon or Alexander the Great.
Throwing in the towel in a way.
Yeah, it is.
Sort of accepting where you're at, and that's fine. It could help a lot of people. Some people need stoicism. But
yeah, it's like I view it as a shield or like a god. You have it up sometimes, but I'm just thinking like
it's good medicine for certain dosages.
Yeah, exactly. Some think about like Alexander the Great. It's like, the Persians, they're too many, and the army's really not up to scratch yet. So we're gonna wait and we're gonna suffer through this. It's like he didn't think that way. He thought, what is the most epic thing I can possibly do? Go out and conquer the world. He believed in it, and now, we can look at it purely historically. We can say that, yeah, he was a brave man and he had good soldiers, but we could also add a spiritual dimension. And I do believe, this is my theory at the moment at least, that he was beloved by the gods and he had divine protection to live out a very beautiful and heroic story. So that is something I believe. I believe in, the Fylgja, it's called in Nordic mythology, guardian angel, we can call it as well. I believe he had many of those.
A daimon, as Plato would call it, a daimon.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and according to all the sources, not even just like the mythologies, like from the Romance, for example, even like Arian and Rufus both talk about how they had to pretty much drag him back to Babylon when he wanted to keep going past India. He was like, what's past India? Let's keep going. And everyone, Antigonus is an older guy who fought with his father, Philip. So he goes back. He saw Alexander be born. That's how old this guy was. He's like, dude, it's not, we're all going to die. Okay. Come on, dude. We're done. We conquered like everything. Persia's done, dude. We got Persia. Like, let's go to bat. Let's all right. And then finally, there's a famous speech called the mutiny speech of Alexander. Just being like basically just, it was a very famous speech that is recorded in a lot of these sources, and it's basically Alexander just going like, let's keep going, like, why do we want to stop here? We're making history. And it's very admirable. It is. And like you said, he's not a stoic. Alexander ain't no stoic, no way. But I do understand, like, I think stoicism could be good for a lot of people, because people do need acceptance where they're at. Sometimes you just can't. There's nothing you can do in certain situations. You got to accept where you're at. But in other times, you're right. Stoicism is not it's not the warrior spirit. It really isn't. It's not what Alexander was, for example. You read a lot of Evola, and that might have a lot to do with your worldview. Evola was revolting against modernity. You seem to be aligned with that idea of revolting against modernity. And a lot of times, and I just started reading Evola, so I have no idea, but I think from just the little bit I've read so far, I think he's misunderstood. And I think a lot of people try to put him as like sort of like a black-pilled author. So this happens with Nietzsche a lot too. Like he's black-pilled, but I don't get that from either of them, especially Evola. I think Evola is trying to give an antidote to modernity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, just to briefly state on Nietzsche, I mean, I think Nietzsche is very white-pilled. I mean, he's
Yes.
grab
He's
life.
life
Yeah,
affirming.
life affirming, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what he says. So I saw a comment. I don't know who commented, but it was a while ago. He said like, Schopenhauer was the black pill and Nietzsche was the white pill in response, something like that. So Nietzsche definitely
That
life
makes sense.
affirming.
I love whoever said that is right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Evola, I would say that some people say he got really black-pilled after the Second World War, but I don't really read it as that either. Of course, yes, there was a certain difference between when he wrote like Pagan Imperialism and Introduction to Magic. So it's a collection of essays that was before the war and then after the war. Yeah, he sort of knew that the chance for his esoteric ideas to come through politically, they weren't really viable anymore. So they did actually try to influence Mussolini to adopt paganism so they could restore like a Roman pagan empire. But Mussolini wanted sort of an alliance with the Catholic Church instead. So they gave up on that idea. But that was with the Ur group, so his magical group he was with. So that's why the guys who write in Introduction to Magic. But otherwise, so what Evola says is to sort of keep your composure. So this is a teaching I've liked for many years now, Ride at the Tiger. So the book itself, it's not super good. I didn't like it. It's not one of my favorites, but the concept, the teaching itself of riding the tiger, it's super good. So that basically means that the modern world, modernity, is the tiger. If you slip from the tiger, you fall underneath it, you will get mauled. The tiger will kill you. So something like this would be to, I don't know, become a normie who's addicted to porn and who eats junk food and who stops striving for something higher. That could be to fall under the tiger in our particular situation. Now, of course, when Evola wrote, we didn't have the same sort of, we didn't have a mass, like almost a endemic or pandemic of pornography like we have today, or we didn't have all of these different poisons around us in the food sectors and everything like that. But we have so many dangers, so to stay on top of the tiger, it can be quite hard, and you need to be quite discerning about what you do in life and how you approach life. But anyway, that's a good way to sort of approach life in the modern world, to see it as you need to stay on top of things. You can't be drawn down to be eaten by the tiger. So to take another example, something I see, and this is not what Evola talks about specifically, but this is just maybe a funny example. You can see guys who they are really disciplined, they go to the gym, they eat well, and they are really focused on their goals, and then they get a girlfriend, and then they start to get comfortable. They start skipping the gym. They start skipping MMA training. They start to comfort eat in the evening because they want to watch a nice film and, eat some pizza, which I understand it. It's nice. That sort of lifestyle, it is nice, but they sort of completely deteriorate from that. So they, at first they stayed on top of the tiger. They rode the tiger upwards and onwards. Then they get a girlfriend, and then they sort of fall off and they stop going to the gym, and then you start to eat bad, and then they're sort of the decline continues. So you have many of these different things that can happen. Or indeed, if we're talking about politics, it can be about corruption as well. That's someone who is really committed to, a committed politician for whichever cause it might be, and then some other interests, they might come in to try to subvert his message, to try to buy him to promote their agenda instead. That could also be sort of falling off the tiger. So there are many things to keep a look on. And then also, like, connected to this, we have Men Among the Ruins, which is a better book, by the way. So the title is Men Among the Ruins, and the teaching there is that we do live in the spiritual ruins of a society, that we don't really have any higher ordering principles anymore. It's not there really. As I said, in Sweden's case, we don't have Christianity. We don't have a church pointing us upwards. We don't have any connection in that sense. So we're sort of lost. We're sort of in the ruins. And then it's even more important to keep our composure, to not sort of accept it, but still be, spiritually composed ourselves. So we see that the world might be fallen, but we shouldn't fall down with it, because we should still be, proper men among the ruins. So we can say that it's normal to be It's normal to be a coward or something like that. It's normal to not stand up for your beliefs. It's normal to, I don't know what normies do. But anyway, it's normal. And then some people accept it, but for a man among the ruins, we should not accept it, because we can see that this is decay. It's not acceptable. So when we see certain things like whomever it might be who says something really, really cocked politically, then we need to say that this is ruin material. This is not what we are. This is not worthy. We need to be bold, speak our minds, even though the entire world might be against us. Now, of course, as we make this particular episode in 2025, the Overton window has shifted a lot in our direction. But say maybe 10 years ago, it was more controversial to say something that is really true. So anyway, long story short, it's about being grounded. It's about being true to yourself, about looking above for approval, to put it like that, and instead not look at, you know, the plebeians. And that's also something Evola talks a lot about, that truth comes from above, it does not come from below. And that's also his critique of democracy. He really, really hates democracy for that reason, that God gives power, or the gods, they are the connection between the king or the emperor and God. That is the connection that goes, not downwards going up. It's not legitimacy does not come from, and this is him speaking, by the way, legitimacy does not come from the people to the emperor, but the emperor brings legitimacy to the land and the realm. He is the connection. He is the axis mundi, what connects the divine with the mundane world.
Yeah, and he's obviously very critical of Christianity too, like Nietzsche. And I think you brought up Stoicism earlier, how you're not a Stoic. I think Christianity, it came out of the Middle Platonic world with the first century, like Philo of Alexandria is a prime example of a philosopher who is a Jewish, Greek speaking, like right where Christianity is. It's Greek, but it's also Jewish, and it's got Stoic tendencies, some cynic tendencies too. Very cynical. You know, Jesus is when you're, and I don't know what just happened with my camera. That was weird. We're reading the Gospels. You can see he's like a cynic. He's like, you know, pushing back against and kind of being very cynical, for lack of a better term. But also Platonic, Platonism. Like, you could see you could see some of the Platonist metaphysics involved in Christianity, and what that produces is sort of the turn of the cheek, for example. That's a prime example of what you would see with like some Stoic thinking. Turn the other cheek, accept it, it's fine. Like well, I think from the little bit of Evola that I've read, he saw the West as the result of this way of thinking for centuries, leading up to what modernity is today. But liberalism, I mean, in a way, kind of comes out of Christianity. So socialism as well, egalitarianism. These are, if you think about it, at its core, very Christian ideas. You know, feeding the poor, worrying about the poor, and building up the poor, and sort of I don't know, living equally among ourselves. You find this in the book of Acts, for example. The apostles sold their property and put it at the feet of the apostles and said, "I'm one of you now." And that sort of way of thinking, when you take the metaphysics away, you end up with sort of like atheist Sweden.
Yeah.
So it is still Christian in a way, but it's just not. They just don't believe in the gods anymore. Is that kind of where would you say Evola and where do you stand on that as well?
Yeah, so first, I completely agree with everything you said. So Evola would say that he is very, very anti-egalitarian, so that you can read through his entire work, both esoteric and political. So I'm more interested in his magical and esoteric writings. His socio-political stuff is it's okay, but the like spiritual, that's where he really shines. But anyway, in everything he does is very, very anti-egalitarian. So with Christianity, first and foremost, he doesn't like the, you know, everyone goes to heaven, or everyone who has done the correct thing goes to heaven. For him, that's really strange. For him, that's very anti-nature. For him, the heroes, the ones who have really done something epic in life, they go on to live in the memories of people. So that's what he means with, he wants someone to actually need to live a life of renown. So that echoes in, ancient Norse views of the world as well, that you live on through your deeds. So for him to have that, everyone goes to heaven who has whatever criteria it might be, but it's a very low threshold to actually get to a very big reward. And for him, that is completely strange. And I agree as well.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So for him, it's like the egalitarian aspect of the afterlife, very bad. And then also it's something a big thing he doesn't like with Christianity is the lack of initiation. So it's like you don't have any higher state. Everyone is on this level. And you have your priest, he reads the Bible to you, and you can't really progress above. So what he likes this initiatory Menerbunds. He likes the mystery cults, the myth of Mithras. Yes, Mithras. That's something Evola likes, that you have something where you can go in. It's hidden. It's not for everyone, because there's secrets they shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's got the 7 levels. Yeah,
exactly. So they go in, they progress. The worthy ones, they are privy to more esoteric knowledge, and they can attain something more in the afterlife as well. So it's very anti-egalitarian, everything he says. So Christianity is on one side that everyone sort of, you get to partake in the same mysteries, which is here, and then you get your reward, which is heaven. So it's a very, plain, not super complex, not super deep. And then on the other hand, you have something like Mithraism, which, you have those levels, you have those initiatory, the esoteric, the hidden knowledge, and then you have the afterlife, which is, earned in a different way. He does say something about Catholicism, though, that Catholicism is traditional, but only halfway. And what it means there is that Catholicism, since it's basically a marriage between paganism and Christianity, they have retained some pagan elements and some mystery rites. And this is something, as having been brought up, the closest Christianity was always Protestantism. So when I see Catholicism, it's always looked a lot cooler, because then I say, why can't the Swedish churches, why don't they have like a cool mass or something like that? Or the Orthodox guys, they have a lot of cool stuff.
Rituals.
Rituals, yes.
Ancient Roman ritual. That's what you get with Orthodoxy. Yeah. Exactly.
So that's really cool. But so Protestantism, when it came in, sort of got rid of a lot of the cool stuff, a lot of the pagan stuff. So it was sort of a step away from Catholicism, and also a step away from
what a shame. Like it's a carcass of a religion. Because you're taking all the mystical, sacred sacraments, the magic. And that is, I was talking to a professor of Platonism. What's his name? I got his book over here. John Dillon. And John Dillon said the Christian Eucharist is magic. It is magic. You are consuming the bread and the blood of a god, and you're getting a sort of mystical union with this god. That's magic. And so they took all that away for Protestants and made it just like this very rational, reading the Bible, pretend like doing history lessons, basically. Like that. It's no longer. There's nothing there. And I think that led to the atheist rational world. I think the first step to the enlightened rationalistic world was the Protestants, because they started picking apart the Bible, and they started criticizing Catholicism and going, wait a minute, this isn't in the Bible. Wait a minute, that's not in the Hebrew part. This is from the Latin part. This is what the project of Luther was like, wait a minute, our whole Old Testament's wrong. This book, and Sirach and Maccabees, they don't even have Hebrew manuscripts. We got to go back to the Hebrew. Forget about the Greek and the Latin. And they became very rational thinking towards theology. And that rational thinking towards theology led to more of a rational way of thinking about history, a rational way of thinking about how we run our society. And the next thing you know, we're in the 16th and 17th century, and now all of a sudden you're starting to see people even rejecting the Bible altogether. And all of a sudden you're starting to see complete scientific mindsets. And I think that was the middleman towards that was the Protestant movement.
Mm.
In a way.
Yeah, so something we can say also on churches in Sweden is that we have, back in the day, we used to have, and you have it still in some churches. So there are some churches around where I am where you have really nicely painted by a man called Albertus Pictor. So he was an artist and he painted church walls. And in many churches they have, and this pains me as an artist, as an artistic soul, it pains me so much, but they've painted over, like white paint over these nice paintings in the churches. So that happened also during, I don't know which century it was, but it was of course connected to the Reformation and to the step towards Protestantism, because they wanted a church to be, you know, sterile and white, so the focus is on God and not, you know, this cool devils and scenes in the church. But you can find them still in some churches, especially here in Uppland. So that's the middle part of Sweden where I am. If you go into some churches, you still have this really cool artworks. But yeah, again, unfortunately, in many churches, they simply just painted over because they didn't want any distractions. So yeah, it's the step away from the mysticism and magic. It's a big loss in my part. And then also it's like, I don't think Protestantism. So now, because I often get the question like, okay, which way, if we're not going to be atheist in Sweden's case at least, where can we go? And I don't really see any appeal for Protestantism. So if younger guys are now looking at Christianity, because I know some people are, because many are influenced by like Nick Fuentes and stuff like that, so they might look at Christianity, but Protestantism doesn't really offer anything cool. So they look at orthodoxy, but it's not really close for a Swedish young guy to be orthodox. Catholicism as well. And I will admit that I've had a phase also maybe 10 years ago when I was interested in Catholicism. So I looked into it a bit deeper, but then I realized after a few, I even went to a SSPX mass, so the traditional Latin mass. But after a while I said, it's not for me. I can't really accept this. And then looking deeper into the actual theology of Christianity and many of these, you know, really strange things you hear Christians say, such as, you know, God bless him, Charlie Kirk, rest in peace. He was a good man. His wife says to forgive his killer. And that's just something that is so, I will actually post on X one of these days. I will post like a genuine question for Christians. Like, what do you think when you hear someone says like, you forgive your husband's murderer? I'm sure some good Christian has some good answer to that. But for me, it's just so strange.
It's actually, if you, and I brought this up earlier, I can see this being part of the Stoic influence on Christianity. Your killer, your husband's killer has done the deed. It's done. What is left now? Revenge? You can talk about revenge, or do you just put on a Stoic? Okay, I accept it. In fact, I forgive you for this. That, in a way, that you can see how that became part of one of the Christian ideals from the first century Middle Platonic world of Cicero and Seneca, and you know, reading Seneca's epistles. It's like reading Christian, or reading like Paul or something. Some of these Stoics sound like Christians, and I think that's what you're getting with Christian. I can actually see why it's powerful in a way. There's a power to being able to just let the world be and just not let it phase you. That's a very powerful thing. So on one hand, I agree with you. I'm not the type of person that's going to forgive someone that murders my family. I just won't. But on the other hand, I can put myself in the position where I can put myself in their shoes and see why it's effective and why it's powerful. I get it, even though I don't agree with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a reason. So I have 2 books in my shelf here as well. It's by a Danish historian, Wilhelm Grönbeck, or however you pronounce it in Danish. And he wrote the Culture of the Teutons, 2 volumes, super good, super interesting for anyone who's interested in sort of like Viking Age mentality. And I will say something positive about Christianity now, because it calmed down the temperature. So if you look at, and he talks a lot about this, the situation in Iceland during the like 900s and the 1000s. So it was like a long, perhaps not a civil war, but you had constant feuding between families. So like a constant blood feud going on for how many generations. Someone had said something to someone else. his family, he went with his brother and father. They killed a cousin, 5 other cousins from the other side. They come to kill that father. The sons avenge him, and then so it goes on. So you actually did have an issue back in specifically Iceland, and also Scandinavia in the broader sense, with these blood feuds that they got really, really out of hand. And that was, of course, there was nothing in the pagan religion that said that is bad. So if we're to play the Christian's advocate here, one could make the case that they made society a bit more stable by getting rid of at least the theological sort of backing for these blood feuds. So there can be some good to it as well.
It's also beneficial to the lower echelons of society. So I see constant. So I actually makes a lot of sense to me why Christian people are so. This is a question I see a lot. Like, how did Christianity end up taking over the Roman Empire? But if you know the history of the Roman Empire and what happened in the 3rd century, Rome was collapsing every other decade. It's called the crisis of the 3rd century. You have a brief period where Aurelian sort of takes everything and brings it all back, but then it kind of falls apart again, and then Diocletian, and then there's like they split it up into different dioceses, or from Diocletian's name actually. But when Constantine is in power, Rome is very poor. The economy is not good. There's a lot of plebs, and by the way, a century prior, in the Severan period, they made everyone a citizen. So the idea of a citizen is not even sacred anymore. Everyone's a citizen. Christianity is the perfect way to sort of govern a society of plebs, because it's putting everyone on an equal playing field. It's telling you, the pleb, you're the highest. In fact, the first will be last, and the last will be first. There is no Jew or Gentile or Scythian or free or slave. In fact, if you're a slave, you're the closest to God. That was a Christian that was the Christian mentality. The more suffering that you're going through, the closer to God you are. In fact, be a martyr for God. That's the highest thing you can do, is to die for Christ. That mentality is a very backward. It's the exact opposite of the aristocratic values of the ancient Athenian or Spartan societies, for example, or the Roman Republic, or even the Roman Empire. Very, very exact opposite way of governing. And in fact, if you have a society, the Roman Empire, for example, where citizenship is very sacred and only given to few, and it's genetic, and your children become citizens if you're a citizen, but the imperial provinces like Judea and Egypt, and they're not citizens. They're part of our imperial. That's why we have senatorial provinces and imperial provinces. They're different. There's different rights. There's different things involved. Like, you might not even be able to see a judge if you get if you got charged. You're just going to go right to the crucifixion if you're part of the imperial province. But if you're a citizen, now you might actually get a court case and all that. So different things apply, but that's an aristocratic governing system. It helps the people on top. It benefits the people on top for that system. But the Christian system benefits the lower echelons. It's very much bottom up instead of top down. And so I think this is what Evola was getting at when he's looking at the ancient aristocratic sort of pagan systems, and he was, I don't know if you agree with this, sort of fantasizing about that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. So he was inspired to a certain extent by Nietzsche, and Nietzsche talks about this in one of his best passages. So it's on the genealogy of morals. I think it's essay 1. So he lays out the case. So everyone should read this. So if anyone is interested in Nietzsche, I would say that particular essay is so telling. So he talks about slave morality and master morality, and it's exactly what you say, that at first the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, the glory days, what brought them up, this upward momentum to conquer the world, was a master morality, that strength is good, beauty is good, being aristocratic is good, noble blood is good. All of the good things that we know simply by nature, what is good. We know that it's good. And then when the Christians came, they needed to, of course, be good in their own right, but they couldn't really say that strength is good or aristocracy is good because they weren't that themselves. So they had to invert. That's the transvaluation of values, or however he phrased it. So they sort of revert all values so that weakness is good or meekness is good. Being a slave is good, as you say. Being an oppressed other is good. And that, of course, makes perfect sense if you have a big population instead of the founding stock of aristocratic Romans, patricians. You have, not only plebs from Italy, but as you say, during was it 212 or something, when they made everyone a citizen. So, and that completely reduced citizenship to nothing at all. So the same thing as we have in the West today. So a citizenship is just a piece of paper. You can just, tear it apart and add remove it in a database, and then it's gone. So it's something completely different when you actually put it out to everyone. It sort of lacks that spiritual legitimacy. So if you have something like the Romans in the old days, or even in our case now, that you had a blood connection to the land, you had a genealogy going back a few generations to a certain land, you had a spiritual legitimacy to it. But without that, and this is something, I'm channeling the spirit of Evola, so he doesn't say this himself, but I could only suppose he would say something like citizenships. If they don't have that spiritual legitimacy, they are not worth anything at all. And it's also like a thing of the modern world. When you don't have a spiritual connection to something, it becomes sort of hollow in a sense. He talks about this when he talks about work, that in a traditional society, any craftsman, he didn't only work for a paycheck. He also worked because of a certain sense of dignity he got from his work, that in addition to getting paid, so if he was a blacksmith or a carpenter, he wanted to do as good of a job as possible, so that it was also, he got closer to almost the divine in his quest for perfection in doing his job. So he says I think if it's the Mysteries of Eros and the Mysteries of Love, he says that a peasant who is good at being a peasant is better than a king who is bad at being a king, or a woman who is perfectly a woman is better than a man who goes something like that. But what it gets at is that everyone sort of has a place and has to be as good as possible to that, to fulfill that role, because it's not only a role about making this amount of money, it's about upholding a sacred part of a greater whole. So you have like a kingdom, everyone has its place, everyone is valued in it. And I think it's quite nice. So when on one hand he talks about anti-egalitarianism, but it's not something demeaning. It's not something demeaning because it still brings like virtue and value to almost everyone within the society, as long as they have sort of their place in it that they perfect.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think I was just thinking about, I just forgot exactly what I was going to say, but Evola, when he's talking about like modernity, for example, he doesn't necessarily think like we have to bring back, if I'm not mistaken, he's not necessarily saying bring back the ancient world. He's saying necessarily like there's like a personal aspect, not like a collective aspect to this. But I could be wrong.
So essentially what he means is primarily the higher central sort of governing principle. So this is only my take. There might be other Evola enjoyers who have a completely different take. But as I see it, you have in a traditional society, and by traditional, we don't mean going back to the 50s. We don't mean being trad, in the trad wife sense. So that's not traditional. Traditional is what is always real, what is always true, what has always been a higher principle throughout history. So if we have we can take something like the Chinese emperor, to use a different civilization, or in the Roman case, Pontifex Maximus, the emperor, he's also the highest priest, and he is the connection between the divine and the world. Same thing in China, you have the emperor, the son of heaven, he has the mandate of heaven. His role maybe the metaphysical aspect of his person connects the divine heaven to earth. in the modern world, there isn't really something like that. The connection to the divine is broken, and now we have instead the demos, the population, the plebs. They are giving legitimacy up here, so we're bound like down here instead of having that connection and that ordering principle. So it goes like this. So that would be at least my attempt at explaining the spiritual dimension of the modern world, which he doesn't like at all. So he often talks about there's a quite interesting conflict during the Middle Ages between the Ghibellines and the Guelphs. So the Ghibellines, they were supporters of the...
Hang on 1 second. I just got...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll be right. Give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
So our fire alarm for the building just went off. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I thought it was like I don't know what it was. I've never even heard that before. So I don't know.
All right.
I can't turn it off. I don't know. I thought if there's like some sort of, let me see. I don't think there's a fire here. Maybe it's
I think malicious entities, they're trying to disrupt our conversation.
Let me just take a look outside to make sure like there's no.
Yeah, do it.
All
do
right.
it, man. Do it.
If you want to look at the chat or something, I don't know. Actually, there's someone that asked a super chat. You can go ahead and take.
What are your guys' thoughts on deism? I still value our myths, ancestors, etc., but I've been struggling with faith that gods answer my prayers or interact with me during communion. Yeah, I'm probably not the best guy to ask this because I have so precious little experience with Christianity. But what I can say is, like, from my own perspective of like being a pagan and trying to work with the gods, is to try to pray for something, and then you might get an insight. So you can try to meditate or something like that, and just ask, and then you might hear whichever voice. Of course, it can be a part of you talking back to you, that it can be as a confirmation of something that you already know or something like that. But it can work as a prayer as well, that you ask, you get a response in whichever setting it might be. So, but yeah, again, I might not be the best one to respond to the question.
It's a sprinkler check. I don't know how long it's going to be.
All right, yeah, we'll just have to bear with it. It's okay.
Yeah, I guess I can turn my volume down, maybe. I don't know. Then you can't hear me. Is it really bad? It's super loud in my ear right now. It's annoying. But anyways, I'll just try to bear through it. What does he ask? What are your guys' thoughts on deism? Otius, I still value our myths, ancestors, but I've been struggling with faith that gods answer my prayers. Yeah, I guess this is understandable. Like, we have a very rational society now. This is just the truth. It's just the truth of things. Like, we're more Aristotelian than we are Platonist in this day and age. Deism, I think it's interesting. I think I guess like deism is basically saying there was some sort of mind that creates the cosmos, and everything's just sort of like put out there, and there's no interference anymore. You're not praying to this deity. This deity is not like actively involved in everyday lives of people. This deity doesn't need anything. It's just created this cosmos, and that's it. That's like as far as deism goes. I don't even know if there's really a difference between deism and atheism, if you think about it. As far as like being a deist, does it really set up any principles? Is there any sort of theological implications? Not really. I think it's interesting as a theory, but I don't know. Is this really distracting, by the way?
Yeah, for me, it's fine. I mean, I can hear it, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to be, but we'll just, whatever. But yeah, but thanks for the super chat. So, all right, back to what we were saying before. I'm going to mute myself while you're talking, so no one, people are probably going to start leaving if I keep
Yeah,
going.
okay. So I can continue with the conversation about
Sure.
Julius Evola and the Ghibellines and the Guelphs. So that was a conflict of sorts. You had the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. They sort of had a rivalry, and the supporters of the Pope, Guelphs, and the supporters of the Emperor were the Ghibellines. So this is something, when you read Evola, it keeps coming up in his work. So it's a medieval conflict, but why it's so interesting is that Evola, he really wanted to have the emperor or the king. He was supposed to be the highest spiritual authority at the same time as the highest worldly, like mundane leader. So he looked at, again, the Roman emperor, the Pontifex Maximus. He had the two roles. So one, he was the emperor in the world, in this world, and also the connection to the above. And then when he saw the papacy, he saw that is being split. So the emperor, he no longer holds that axis mundi position because the Pope has it. And he didn't like that at all. And then I read a few books about, or two books by John Julius Norwich, like 2 years ago, about the Normans in Italy. I made podcast episodes about it as well. And there was so many intrigues with the Pope and the emperor. So like popes intriguing against each other, against the emperor, against other barons in Italy. So I mean, there is a really, really interesting story there. And then we come to the popes such as the Borgia popes and everything like that. So the Pope, as he was basically a warlord back in the Middle Ages as well, in many cases. So he had a rivalry, at least, with the Holy Roman Emperor. And that for Evola, he often goes back to that, because he, in his ideal, the emperor is the highest worldly and also highest spiritual function. And this in turn goes back to a disagreement he had with René Guénon. So René Guénon was also sort of, they were friends or colleagues, I suppose. They respected each other. They agreed on a lot of things. But they had one main disagreement, and that was in Guénon's worldview. The Brahmin, the priest, that was the highest, closest to God. So sort of contemplation, that is the way to God. But for Evola, he was of a more warrior archetype, more kshatriya, to use that term, more action-oriented. So in his view, the path to the divine, and this is more classical, by the way, it was more action-oriented. You need to do something. You need to be in, fighting the First World War, as he did, mountain climbing, everything like that. So Evola was a risk taker. He was a man of action in the sense. So if we psychoanalyze them from that perspective as well, it was quite natural that Guénon was more of a thinker, contemplating in his chamber, whereas Evola, he sort of gained insights from actually being out and conquering the world. So he had a bit of a different view on it, and that can also explain Guénon. He converted to Islam. He moved to Egypt and lived there for the rest of his days. And Evola, of course, he was a pagan who approached it in a different way. But that also goes into the discussion, because again, when Evola, he criticizes Guénon, he says that, look at this Roman emperor. He was, a martially talented often. I mean, look at Julius Evola or Augustus or someone like that, or Emperor Julian the Blessed died in battle. So I mean, these guys, they were also of the warrior caste. Same thing, by the way, in Norse mythology, that you had the again, he talks about William Grönbeck in the Culture of the Teutons. He talks a lot about this, that the king, he also needs a strong warrior haminga, so a lock on his side. So in the Aryan tradition, or Indo-European tradition, that the warrior, the leader, the highest spiritual authority, they're often the same. So they go into each other, and then he can bring down sort of, he's the connection to the divine, and then he can bring down to his troops and his men and his chosen men as well. So when Evola, then, he might have seen these priests, they're only contemplating things. They aren't really, he doesn't take it. I'm just analyzing, by the way, now, so maybe I'm wrong, but when I read Evola, I get the sense that he probably didn't like the notion of priests, lording it over these men of action. So that goes into the Greek ideal as well, that, you need to be a man of action. You need to be physically fit. You need to pursue that path. You cannot only be, a thinker or something like that. So, yeah, it was a bit of a rant.
No, that's great. Plus, the less talking for me right now is good. They're still doing this stupid test right now, and it's going to drive me. I'm about to flip out. If I need some stoicism right now. That's what I need.
No stoicism,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is the situation in Sweden like? Because you guys had this rich Nordic past. Is there a revival of? Are people going back towards ancient Nordic paganism, or is there any? I should ask you this first. Is there places in Sweden that are still existent from the ancient Nordic world that have gone through the Christian world, gone through modernity, and are still a lot around? Or is it more people going back to like a neo-paganism type of thing?
Yeah, so I would say that we have a folklore that survived up until this day, I suppose. So that's not specifically pagan in its like religious worship, but more like the worldview that you have, trolls in the forest. And now I'm not talking about necessarily a physical troll, but more like maybe a metaphysical entity that exists in the forest or something like that. This is also something, by the way, when we're talking about like atheism, Christianity, and paganism. So you have atheism, then everything is sort of dead, just materialism. And then you have Christianity, which is, yes, you have angels and stuff like that, but the nature spirits aren't quite there, or if they are there, they're sort of evil. But then you have paganism, where you have, the whole world is full of life. So both physical, material life, and also metaphysical life. So you have, like, if I go out in the forest right now, I'm gonna know that there might be a forest entity there. There might be the spirit of a mountain that you can communicate with. Tree spirits, so a dryad in Hellenic myth or something like that. So the entire worldview is a lot more alive, and that's worldview is easier to survive, even though you might go to church every Sunday and say that Jesus is my savior, but you can still believe that there are elves out in the forest, or some forest demon or spirit or whatever it might be. So I would say that paganism as such, I do think our friend Tom survived the jive. He posted some evidence of someone has been a magician of Odin in the 1700s or something like that. So you still have that sense, but I would say that if we're looking at the folklore, that's something that you can see a continuous line. But as for now, I would say that there's more of a return to it all. So the gods, in a sense, they've always been with us, metaphysically speaking, and then culturally speaking. So you have, during the 1800s, you had like a romanticist movement, a revival, and then you have, so if you go to Stockholm, you can see like statues of Odin and Thor, and famous artworks. There's a really cool artwork with Thor, and then when he's clean shaven, has long blonde hair, and really muscular, he sits in a chariot with his hammer, and then he rides with his goat wagon, and then giants are on the side, and he's just bashing their heads in. So that's a really cool thing. So this is still like, Christian, 1800s, Sweden was still a Christian country per se, but their spirits still there. Same thing with Odin and the Wild Hunt that sort of came through there anyway, sort of like the Renaissance in Italy. So it's quite fun if you go to a place like Spain. You have one of my favorite places on earth. It's called San Ildefonso. It's like an hour north of Madrid. And then you have, and that is built in, is it 16 or 1700s? I think something like that. But it's full of pagan gods. So the planetary gods. You have Mercury, and you have Jupiter and the Roman gods, basically. So it was quite interesting that they built that full of, so Catholic Spain has always been quite devoutly Christian in that sense, but still they had no issue putting up. This is it. Here we go.
I knew exactly
Let's
what you were talking about.
go.
Yeah, that's amazing. This is an amazing painting, though.
It's awesome. That's awesome. That's my pre-workout motivation.
Nice.
So anyway, with San Ildefonso, they still didn't have any issue, putting up these gods. So that kind of tells me that when we talk about the Christian period, it's more of a, the gods never really gone, in my sense. And then we can look at a place like Iceland, where you had a long period of syncretic religion. So I read a really interesting book by Stephen E. Flowers. It's called Icelandic Magic. It was my first magic book I read, by the way. And there he goes to the source material. He looks at spells, and it's like, I invoke Jesus, Odin, and Satan help me win this law case, and something like that. So it's really syncretic in that sense. And I can only suppose that it was the same in Scandinavia as well, that it was a long period of, Christianity comes in more and more. At first it was like white Christ, the warrior who led his retinue in battle against the Roman. I mean, that is how they sold in Jesus to the Germanic tribes. So it was not like turn the other cheek. No, it was this guy, he killed Romans. He was a warrior. He was a white Christ with a sword, and he can defeat everyone. He's a powerful god. Look at this, the Frankish Empire, Charlemagne, he has Jesus by his side. Look how powerful he is. So I mean, that was more of how they sold it into the Germanic tribes, that is a warrior god. And then, of course, so that you can say maybe 200-300 years, that was the Jesus that they had. It was a warrior god they added into the pantheon. So, okay, we have, Odin, Thor, Frey, and then we have Jesus here. He's also a good god to pray to if we want to have victory or something like that. And then later on, as we progress, maybe, Christianity or Christ himself becomes more important, and the other gods sort of fade into the background. But how much of them faded away, hard to say. But I can only suppose that out in the countryside, maybe some people still prayed to the old gods. But anyway, to respond to the question, I would say that now, at least from what I can see, we have a certain revival, not a super big one, because people are more interested in like politics and stuff like that, which is completely normal and understandable. I spend most of my time talking about politics as well, but I see it in the sense that how can I get as much power as possible in whichever way? Yeah, okay, so I can train myself to speak well. I can train myself in the gym so I'm happy and healthy. I can write a lot so I can be, have a sharp pen. And I can also gain power from, being blessed by the gods. And how am I blessed by the gods? By living a good way so I can accumulate a good haminga. So haminga is sort of like karma, but it goes through your bloodline. So you can work up a really good haminga. And this is also...
Or alcebeia in Greek. Yeah. Same concept.
So super important for any type of leader as well, that your followers, they want to partake of your haminga. Everyone wants to follow a jarl, a leader. So there's a classic Viking Age thing as well, that who is the jarl with the most haminga, with the strongest haminga? Yeah, I want to follow him because he will be, he will have luck on his side. He will have fortune on his side. So luck in that sense is not, sheer chance either. It's like the favor of the gods you bring with you. So you can give luck to someone else as well. So a jarl or a king, he can give his haminga to an explorer. An explorer comes to him and says, can I have some of your haminga? Can I have your blessing? And then he can lend it to the one going out for a Viking expedition or whatever. So they had a quite strong concept. And this is something I believe in 100% now, that haminga is something that is real and working, can go into something like a guardian angel. And I made a podcast about it about a year ago when Trump just got, he got shot, almost died. And I said, I can look at this and say it was a sheer coincidence that he survived, or I can actually look at it and say, yeah, his haminga was strong because he has fought against evil powers. And I'm not saying that Trump is perfect or anything like that, but I'm saying that he has done a lot of things that could increase his haminga. He's taken a lot of risks and everything like that. So I believe that was a result of his guardian angel, or his fylgja, to use that term, looked out for him. So yeah, it's quite powerful stuff.
Yeah, I when I went to Greece, I noticed not only is there a revival of ancient Hellenism, but there was, in fact, in not in the cities, not in the urban areas. The urban areas have been taken over by Christians since antiquity. But in the countries, in the more, like the way deep in the mountains, and there was some holdouts where the ancient pagan traditions held out through the generations. And at first I was skeptical. I go, are they just saying this? But you can actually look at the sources and trace it down. There's a 9th century source of the Byzantine, some sort of Byzantine source, about Christian authorities going into Asia Minor, going into Arcadia, which is where I was, one of the places mentioned, and encountering pagans still in the 9th century. And so there's certain places, Arcadia is one of them, where they didn't care what the consequences were, death, whatever. They just kept holding on to their traditions. And to this very day, there is a certain few pockets that have stayed all the way to this day. And Arcadia is one of them. That's where I visited people. They were building a temple of Pan there. But there's also a revival, and the revivalists are looking to these people for like sort of like what should we do, and this, how should we build our temple, what should we do to this, and it's fascinating to see this. And they're obviously being pushed back against by the Christians, because the Christians are in charge in Greece. It's a Christian state. The Orthodox Church is pretty much calls the shots in Greece, and for good reason, because they needed some sort of opposition to the Turks when they got their independence. So there's a reason why it's like that. I get it. I went there to go film and capture this sort of battle between the Christians and the pagans. I thought I was going to get in the middle of it and see this. I'm going to root for the pagans, right? That's me. But I found when I got there that there was actually, even though it's true that there was Christian authorities trying to stop these temples from being built, that was the more of the top levels of the Christian church. But when you talk to everyday Christians that attend these churches, they were united by being Greek. They were united by, like, they were like, oh yeah, I know about those pagans over in Arcadia. God bless them. Like, they're Greeks. We love our Greeks. And I was surprised to see that they were more united by their Greekness than they were divided by their religion. That was fascinating. It kind of blew me away a little bit. It was like, I was kind of jealous, because we don't have that in the United States. There's just nothing like that. We don't have a gymnos in the United States, because it's where everybody went from different places. There's Dutch travelers, German travelers, Italian travelers, and of course the English were always there. And then you have Native Americans, and like there's just different people mixing here. It's just a big melting pot. But Greece has held their Greekness all this whole time. And the way you described Sweden, in a way, reminds me of that. One of the playbooks of Christianity that you get from early on, like when you read the Greek magical papyri, you're finding Jesus next to Ion, next to Iao, Bacchus, and Aphrodite's in some of these hymns, right next to Jesus's name. Or Moses is sitting next to Homer in some of these Greek magical papyri. And what the Greek magical papyri shows me is that even though on the top level, the church was like, no, like Porphyry's debating whatever church fathers were around in Porphyry's time. I think it's like Saint Gregory or something like that. I forgot something like that. And so they're debating on the top levels. They're the educated elites, and they're debating, and there's no mixing going on between them. Porphyry is strictly pagan, Platonist, and these other Christians and whatever the church fathers at that time are strictly Christian. And they're borrowing ideas metaphysically. Like there's some Neoplatonist borrowing in the church, but they're not putting Jesus next to Aphrodite. But on the bottom, on the people of the bottom, the average Joe farmer, they don't care. They're going to go to the grotto of Pan on Saturday and then go to church on Sunday. And this is something that I've noticed that all throughout time. Pope Gregory, I talk about this on my channel all the time, so people who watch me every day are going to hear me repeat myself, but it's fine. Pope Gregory writes a letter to the bishop in London in the early 6th century, telling the bishop in London to not destroy the pagan sites, don't do it. Leave the pagan sites as they are, take the idol out, put a cross in there, sprinkle some holy water on it, and then let them keep continuing to do what they do. Let them have their ritual. Let them have their solstice events. Let them have their equinox events and their New Year's traditions. We want to keep things active and going, and that seems to be the Christian playbook. So in a way, I admire that, because they sort of keep the European identity alive, even as they Christianize it. This is how we still know about Odin. This is how we still know about Thor. This is how we have Homer being copied by Byzantine copyists who were literally Christian monks. They didn't have to do that, Now we lost 98% of our sources. Let's be real. I don't want to give them too much credit. We lost 98% of our primary sources from antiquity. And but they did preserve enough that we can kind of piece together what these pagans were like. So I kind of got to give it a little credit, a little due where it's due.
Yeah,
their playbook.
Yeah. I mean the Icelandic Snorri Sturluson, for example. I mean they preserved a lot as well. I need to say something I completely forgot, and this is quite silly of me. So I feel a bit silly now when I there we have him. I think that's by Albertus Pictor, by the way.
Yeah, this is in the Snorri translation book. That's from.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if he painted this, but it's associated with his work.
So it looks like Albertus Pictor, the style, the aesthetic of it. I'm not sure if it's actually him.
No, you're probably right. You're probably right. Yeah.
But anyway, I thought to say something. I completely forgot, and this I forgot because it's so obvious to me, so I didn't think about it. But of course, we have our main tradition in Sweden is midsommarafton. So that's the number one tradition. And that is like you have a midsummer pole, which is Frey's, serpent sticking in the ground to fertilize the ground. So, I mean, that's quite pagan. So it's a pagan holdover that we still celebrate. So we have like Yule, Christmas, and then we have Midsummer. These are the two big celebrations in Sweden. And Midsummer, I think some Christian once tried to put some sort of saint's name on it, but no one has ever cared.
That was the playbook.
Yeah. But it's like we've celebrated it since time immemorial, with Frey putting his serpent in the ground to fertilize it. So that's what Midsummer is, and then we dance around it. So Midsummer is like an unbroken tradition in that sense. Same thing with Yule. So we celebrate it on the 24th, so almost the same as 25th in the other countries, but we still call it Yule. So Yule, we don't call it. There is the name Kristmässa, like Christ Mass or something like that, but it's still like it's a very syncretic thing. And for me, growing up, it was all about the presents and being time off from school and nice food and everything like that. So no one really cared about. Perhaps some older people cared about it, but the point I'm making here is that we have traditions still going through that. Of course, as you say, they have been mixed with Christianity. They've put a sticker on it saying Christian, or like put a cross on it, and now it's Christian. But it has survived for a long time also. And then I thought to say that you mentioned that the peasantry, if they have been more syncretic, and that makes perfect sense. If we believe in the divine, as I do now, I'm confident in saying that I believe that a prayer can help. So if you are then, out in a winter in Scandinavia during the 1100s or something, the harvest doesn't look all too good, then you can't really afford to be too theologically pure. You can't be a Puritan. You pray to Frey, you pray to Jesus, you pray to whichever god you think might help you survive the winter. Or indeed, if you are in a feud in 900s Iceland, and this other clan, they're coming at you. They have 5 cousins, 2 brothers, 2 uncles, and you have yourself, your father, and your brother. You're outnumbered. You need to do a quick prayer. You pray to Tyr, Thor, Odin, and this Jesus guy. I've heard that he's a really powerful warrior, and these powerful guys in Southern Europe, they pray to him. Pray to Jesus that we can withstand this blood feud, because otherwise we're gonna die. So I mean, it's quite natural if you think about it, that you see a powerful god, you just take it, give me whatever you have. It's like you can't be too picky about the weapons you can take. And for me, when I say that, if I am in some sort of predicament, yes, I do pray to the gods, because there have been too many situations where there has been a noticeable effect by me doing so. So I can just say it for myself. Everyone has to experience it for themselves, but I can at least say that I do believe that there are benevolent gods looking out for me. So of course I'm gonna try to, and of course I'm not gonna cast them aside just because a priest says so. Because when real, consequences are at stake, then you can't really afford to throw them away. So I would say that the pagan gods, of course, they've always been with us metaphysically, perhaps not out in the open, but also some to a certain extent out in the open.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of Paul when he's saying, I'm a Jew to the Jews to win them over, and I'm a Gentile to the Gentiles to win them over. And it's like that became the Christian playbook, and they sort of that's sort of how they were so successful, was they were able to sort of what's the word? They were able to compromise with whatever state they were in. So like in the early periods, you can see them sort of emulating Roman traditions, and this is why you get the Catholic Church. And then later in Middle Ages, when they start moving more north and start getting into the Germanic territories, you can see them, as what you say, portraying Jesus as a blonde-haired warrior, and like to win them over. You know, it makes a lot of sense. But you talked about. There's a couple of super chats I see. Thank you for those. I'll get to them in a second. But I wanted to ask you something. You talked about, how you think you have some protection, some sort of daimonic protection. And you had pretty much some sort of drama a couple months ago where there was some sort of, I forgot who she was. She's some sort of like media.
Yeah, a journalist here. So yeah,
what happened with that, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, so I mean, by that stage, I've been quite hardened over all of these years of hit pieces and lies and everything like that. But yeah, no, they made a documentary called "Hacking Hate," and yeah, she wanted to portray me as a.
It was all about you, or about you and other people?
No, not only about me, but about right wing in. But it was also it was such a silly thing because it was like hacking hate, but everything is out in the open. So it was supposed to be like an investigative journalist finding secrets, but it's like everything I think is online. It's like I want people to hear.
I've never heard you say anything hateful.
Yeah.
I mean,
same.
I mean, yeah, kind of bizarre to me. But anyways, what was she? So what was the point of it?
Basically, she wanted to make so the overall story she wanted to say is that I have infiltrated the right-wing scene.
I've had this happen to me before. That's why.
Yeah, but the silly thing
to me. Recently, it's happened to me. So
yeah. I mean, they want to do it, and they want to be edgy, investigative journalists uncovering secrets. But it's like we don't have any secrets because we want to reach as many people as possible. I want my YouTube to be like 5 million subscribers. I want it to be as big as possible. So I'm not hiding anything. On the contrary, I want to reach out to as many people as possible. So I thought it was the whole theme of the documentary. It was really silly, but yeah, it was not only about me. She looked at other people as well, and she wanted, like they always want to portray right-wing guys as being hateful and violent and everything like that. So but yeah, I mean, by that stage, it was only earlier this year. I was quite used to all of these things. So it's it's just the way I view it is like, more people they get to know about me, they can check out my stuff for themselves, and they say I'm quite a reasonable guy. So
yeah, I think so. Your work's pretty good. So I've recently got accused of one person said my platform is a safe space for Nazis. Okay. Another person said I was transphobic, and then said, I can't believe you're going to criticize trans people. Never said a word about trans people in my entire life. In fact, right-wingers have dug up me defending trans people and called me a weird leftist for that. So I don't know which one it is. I actually had I've had guests on my channel who are trans talk about Christianity. But apparently I'm transphobic. I don't know. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. But I brought it up because it's weird. It's like a demon. Like it's like some sort of demon attack. Like, where do you people come from to start this drama? It's like, I don't understand. How does someone like wake up in the morning and decide, like, I'm going to make a project attacking people and calling them racist, right wing, and like, how do you like sleep at night doing that? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even talk about this, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a demonic element to it, and there is. Nietzsche talks about this as well, and Dostoevsky, he talks about it. He has a really nice book. It's Notes from Underground, and that's written from the perspective of someone who is like really, really bitter. So it's almost like a demon of bitterness eating him up from the inside, and he has this sort of schizophrenic view of the world as well, that everything is set against him. So if he goes past, now I'm taking a modern example, so Dostoevsky doesn't say this, but I'm translating it into our current age. So if one of these leftists, an underground leftist, he goes past a Chad, a good-looking Chad who's life-affirming, and he looks fit and he looks healthy, and the Chad might look at him, then the resentful leftist, he creates a scenario in his head that this Chad that walked past me, he was looking at me because he wanted to push me down, and then that train of thought just spirals out of control, and that causes him to be so mogged, to use that term, like mogged. He probably feels mogged by that Chad. So therefore, he can only think about revenge. How can I get revenge of this perceived slight? Because this Chad, he made me feel so bad. So now I need my revenge. So I think that's also like a main driving factor for these leftists, that they're only bitter at their own station in life, because whatever it might be. I mean, you can look at them as well. They're usually quite like, not the healthiest individuals, so they want to get revenge. And even though someone like me, I've never done them anything bad, on the contrary, they could listen to my advice and be healthier, but they don't see it. They see that I have caused offense to them, because for them life is a zero-sum game. If I gain prestige and glory, it's at their expense. I've never talked to them, and this is also something they see in their view of history, that Sweden and Switzerland can only be prosperous because black people suffered in Africa 200 years ago. They have nothing to do with each other. Like the sweat and hard work of Europeans, it's something else, but they don't see it. They can only see the zero-sum game. If someone gains something, that means someone else has to lose. That can be applied on a political level, so therefore white guilt. It can be applied on a personal level. The Chad here, I'm getting up in the world, I have success with this and that means that it's at their expense, and that causes them to hate me. So I think that sort of resentment, that envy, that sheer hatred, that drives them.
Yeah. It's like it reminds me of they're sort of emulating the Christians in a way, because the Christians sort of did this where, well, I guess I say the Judeo-Christians, because they're a sect of Judaism in the beginning, and they're like thinking of the world as like, all right, Romans are attacking us, they just sacked our temple, and like we can't fight back by defeating them with armies, but we can infiltrate religion and become like Christianity can start coming in and taking over these urban areas, and they instead of winning with strength and arms, they won the mental game in a way. And so this is kind of what I see like a lot of liberals act like, and sort of following that playbook. Like we can't beat them physically, we can beat them with media, we can beat them with movies and film and music, and through influencing people through these mediums instead. I see that sort of continuing into this day right now. Maybe not Christians, but more of the left-wing sort of people.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say they attacked the moral framework. So the Christians, they had initially in place in Rome, you had like a Roman moral framework where strength, beauty, aristocracy, those are good. So the Christians, as you say, they couldn't take up arms because they would have gotten beaten down by the Romans. So they attacked the moral framework, started to slowly but surely restructure the moral framework into meaning something completely else. And this is one of my main teachings at this particular time. This is something I've really come to appreciate over the last 2 years or something, the moral framework. And this is something that the left in all of the West, they have taken control. They have fashioned it. They have been the artisans of the moral framework we operate within right now. And that says that white man bad, oppressed other good. That's essentially it. That's the moral framework we're operating within. So what we need to do now, if we want to save the West, it's to take that battle, the moral framework. What is good? White man good is what I say. So that's the counteroffensive I'm portraying. So this is a super important battle to take, this moral battle. And then when a moral has been established, then political change is possible. So it's like you have politics here, like realpolitik, what actually happens. when something gets implemented, it needs to be, the lead up to it needs to be the moral framework. Everyone agrees. What's a reasonable course of action? A reasonable course of action is to deport foreign criminals. Everyone has to agree. This is what is good. This is what is moral. This is what a good person believes. That is the absolutely first thing that needs to come in mind. Then metapolitics, showing like a rough plan. This is how you can do it. This is why it's good. And then comes the political change in the last sense. But the moral, they attacked it first. They shaped it, and then everyone else sort of conformed to it. So what we need to do is simply to reshape it in our vision instead.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a couple questions here. Let's see. S. Mill, thank you for the super chat. What about the Swedish Sami shamanic tradition revival?
I don't know super much about it, to be honest, but I do know that they are, so the relationship between Swedes and Sami, it's been a bit strained over the centuries. I mean, Swedes were here first, then the Samis came much, much later from the north, settled the northern part of Sweden, been nomadic, but during the 17 and 1800s, there were Swedish missionaries, and they sort of converted many Samis. So Christianity for Samis, I don't know. I haven't talked to any Sami about it, but I can only suppose that it's something they only associate with like the Swedish government wanting to control them. So I don't think Christianity is anything strong at all, but the Sami shamanic tradition is like theirs. It's an expression of their identity. So it's like you have an identity, the whole package. It includes your spiritual traditions. So I can only suppose that whomever is Sami is also interested in that aspect of their identity. But again, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I don't know super much about it, but that's just me speculating about it.
Yeah, you ever heard these? And I have no idea if this is true or not, but I've heard people talk about like the shamanic tradition of reindeer and Animita muscaria, and the red and white colors in Christmas time having to do with Animita muscaria growing underneath evergreen trees, green, red, and white. Have you heard this or no?
No,
So
I haven't.
It might not be true, because if you don't know it, you're in Sweden, then it's probably just some American bullshit, like talking about the Nordic Santa Claus.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's something to it. We call it flugsvamp, so like fly mushroom, the mushroom you were talking about. So I know some have speculated, like, oh, did the berserkers, the Viking berserkers, did they use mushrooms to enter altered states of consciousness? So I'm not ruling it out at all. So maybe, who knows? Maybe there were, Nordic priests or shamans who also did something similar. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. There might be something to it. I haven't looked much into it. The berserker thing though, where did that? How far back can you trace that to? Like, and tell people about what that is.
So a berserker is essentially a warrior he goes so deep into a battle frenzy that he loses himself, and this is something you can happen to anyone, really. Well, perhaps not to anyone, but I'm sure many guys who have been perhaps in Gotham City, you lose yourself, and then you come to maybe 10-30 seconds later, and like, oh, what happened during those 30 seconds? Maybe someone has been in a fight or whatever it might be. You get that rage in you. So for a berserker, that could be like a longer period of time. And this is super, super interesting. This is a case for, when we're talking about pure physical strength, unaugmented, and then you add in the layer of like magic or metaphysics or something, that some guys, they can become a lot stronger than they can physically should be able to do. So there's Eddie Hall, when he deadlifted 500 kilos, he said in an interview something like, I tried to use, he didn't say magic, but it was magic because he used a mental image. So he heard like a news report of a woman who lifted a car because her children, they were under the car, so she had to like rescue them, and he was like, okay, I need to try to envision as much as possible here that I am also, my children are under that car. I need to get that, because then you will get sort of like a divine blessing or a supernatural power. And when we're talking about the berserkers, you have another instance with a UFC fighter. I think it was maybe named Anthony Johnson, something like that. So a light heavyweight, so a big guy, world class MMA athlete, so a really like dangerous dude. And he had gotten a visitor in the night, and it was like a lightweight wrestler or something, or not a wrestler, a guy who had competed like once in college in like, not in a big weight class or anything, but he was on something, either a drug or some sort of trip of some sort, some psychotic break he had. And he told, I think the interview is up on YouTube, so I suggest everyone to look at it if you're interested in that. And he said, like, I hit him with everything I got. And now we're talking about a big, professional MMA athlete just laying at him, this crazy guy. But he said, like, nothing could rock him. Nothing could even rock him, because he has kept coming at him. And it was the most bizarre thing he had ever encountered. So that made me think of the berserkers and what they could do back in the day. So probably a quite scary thing to meet one of these guys in battle. And augmented. Actually had a teacher when I was in high school. She told me something similar during her youth, because we talked about drugs and they supposed it was drugs. So in her youth, she had been out with some friends and they had encountered a man. So they literally had to sit on him, like the men in the group as well, but also the women. And he still managed to like throw them aside and just run away or something. And they called the police as well. It was a big event of it. But there is something to supernatural powers getting into a human, making them being able to do a lot more than they should be able to do. And this is something I experiment in the gym as well, to try to invoke certain images in my mind so I can actually push through a certain lift. So quite interesting stuff. But as for how long back it goes, I can only suppose back to the days of the Indo-European choreos, the Männerbund, during that time with the wolf initiation, something, or even further back. I don't know.
Well,
but
there seems to be a parallel tradition in Greek and Roman thought too, of the frenzy. These, what are they called? They called the sometimes some traditions call them the Charites, the dancing like the dancing soldiers, or the what is it called? Dactyls, the dactyls, which means fingers, but for some reason they're called dactyls. Anyways, they're for warriors that go into whip themselves up into a frenzy, sometimes with the use of substances. There is a passage in Arian about Alexander and his army all the way in the middle, Far East, in like near to Afghanistan, all the way over there. And they came to a mountain that had ivy growing on it. So they saw the ivy, that's a symbol of Dionysus. And they saw the ivy and they thought, because there were stories in the Hellenistic period, even before that, this would be pre-Hellenistic period, right before, there were stories about Dionysus traveling in the East, going to India and fighting wars out there, just as they're doing. They're following the steps of Dionysus, doing exactly what Dionysus did, fighting wars in the East. And when they saw the ivy growing on the mountain, they took the ivy and made wreaths out of it and put the wreaths on and went immediately into a Bacchic frenzy. So I just think of that, like the warriors in a frenzy all the way in the East. And I just think like there's some sort of tradition that I can see that they're all sort of following, the Indo-European, maybe Yamnayan tradition. Who knows?
Yeah, so there's a really good book. I have it here in my bookshelf as well. It's by an author named Chris Kershaw. It's really hard to find, though. I wish she would. I wish she would publish it anew, because it was sort of a dissertation they made into a book. But it's called Odin, the One-Eyed God, and the Indo-European Männerbund. Something like that is the title. And then she discusses, like in a very academic way. It's a research paper, but the tradition of that cult of, not necessarily Odin, because he goes a lot deeper down to the Yamnaya as well, that sort of tradition where you have the wolf cult, the ecstasy of it, and that also goes into the Viking Age with the Odinic wild hunt. And this is something, an image I've used over my years as well. So for anyone who's been subscribed to me for a long time, I use the wild hunt challenge. So like a challenge, it can be like to read a book and start to train or whatever it might be. But the point is that you're imbued with a spirit that lifts you up and like says, let's go upwards and onwards, and that is the Odinic frenzy going in, and it can be a poetic frenzy as well, a poetic inspiration, but most usually, at least back then, it was a warrior frenzy that Odin just takes you, it hits you with an energy, and then you just ride with it. So yeah, it's quite crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's the Lycaeans in Greek, the Greek Lycaeans, and they're like considered the wolf people. That's what the word Lycaea means, wolf-like. So that, yeah, something going on with that too. It's fascinating how much overlap you find in all these Indo-European traditions, even going all the way to the east and finding India, seeing they have certain words that line up, and gods holding thunderbolts, and the imagery, the swastika, all that stuff that you find in all these traditions that show they're all descending from some sort of common ancestry of culture. It's pretty fascinating. So yeah, thank you for that. Will Mosse, thank you for the $10. Golden, if hierarchy is not degrading, will you be happy to be a slave or serf? Your quest for strong hamnga suggests you don't believe them honorable enough for you. So why should others take it? Seems like someone's challenging you here.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So what I can say is that everyone should view themselves as a servant of sorts, and then do the best in that position as possible. So a king is also a servant. It's just you have more responsibility. So the higher up in hierarchy you are, the more responsibility you take, and that's perfectly fine. So it's like it would be torture to have an individual who's clearly not fit for it to be. So say Kamala Harris, for example, she should not be president of the US. It would be mean to her to let her be the president of the US, because she's clearly not cut out for it. And we're all happy that she is not the president. And that is what is meant by, and I'm just saying what Evola said. I'm not necessarily saying that this is what I think, although I think this. So, but my point is that if everyone finds their part in life, their part of the big story. I made a video about this a while back, that a society based on love, a society where everyone does something, not only for money, but also the dignity it brings, that you are, you are part of something that you can be proud of. You can be a street sweeper and you still feel part of, you feel proud to be part of a nation. And then for some people, they know that they shouldn't be in a certain position because that's not their calling. They don't have the right, I can't be a singer, for example. I don't have the voice to sing. I would like to be on a scene like an opera to sing. I can't do it. I don't have that talent, so I'm not going to insist on me doing that. And for me, if someone placed me on a scene saying like, oh, but you should try, it would be embarrassing for me. And it would be mean to me to place me on a scene for me to sing, because that's not my part to play. So everyone can find dignity. I have my part to play. I can only humbly submit myself to the path the gods have set out for me, just as everyone else should.
Interesting answer to that. An interesting question. I guess if I had to think about, like, would I be happy as a slave or a serf? I kind of grew up. I wouldn't say like poor or anything. I wasn't on parents weren't on welfare, but I'm working class. Both my parents were working, so it wasn't like grandma's watching me and my brother, type. So like I understand the life from being like middle class. But if I was like poor and had nothing, I guess I'd be striving to get higher. I don't know how to answer that question without having the brain that I have now. Like the brain that I have now says, if I was poor, get out of there. I don't know if I don't know if you know this, but my channel knows this. I went to prison when I was in my early 20s. When I got out of prison, I had to go to a halfway house. I had to go on welfare for a little while. I had to work at various jobs doing concrete and whatever, like hard labor. And I worked myself out of it. And I ended up getting better jobs. And now I work for myself now. So I guess that's how I would answer that question. If I was like stuck as a slave and I couldn't have the ability to move up, well, then I would be a stoic, because that's the only way out of it. You have to somehow accept where you're at in life and not be, because stoicism is an antidote for the sort of mentality of like people who are bitter at people of other people who have more than them. So you can be poor and you can see someone drive by in a Bentley and they pull up in their mansion, and you can be very bitter, and maybe you want to go rob their house tonight, put on a ski mask, and maybe I'll even murder them or something, like whatever, like really dark and nasty type of way of breaking back at the system. Or the stoicism sort of is an antidote to that. I'm a slave. Like Seneca was a slave. Seneca, the Stoic Seneca, was a slave, and he became educated and wrote about like not necessarily. One of the big principles you find in reading Seneca is not worrying about being well. What is wealth going to give you but vanity? I can have not, or like Diogenes, the cynic, had nothing but walked around with. Sometimes it says he's naked, and he got his water from the river, and he ate with his hands. He didn't even have utensils. I can admire that way of thinking. If you had to be that way, I guess that's the way to do it. But if you have the ability to move around and you have the ability to achieve more, I would rather be that. I would rather be more Promethean than Stoic, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I also want to clarify something, that I am politically a nationalist, which means I look out for all of my people. I want everyone in the nation to be well taken care of. I also do believe in upward mobility. I do believe in meritocracy as well. But I also so there is a certain freedom also in having your vocation, that it's okay to follow your vocation and you can feel pride and dignity in it. So now in the current culture, it's almost like the more money you make, the better. And that's something Evola goes very much against. He goes against the work hard ethic. He's more about finding dignity in work. So if you are a shoemaker, there is dignity in that, in making the best shoes possible. And it's completely fine to be that. So I would say that it's rather degrading to have a mindset where, this hyper-capitalist mindset where the one who makes the more money, he is better. That's not what Evola thinks at all. Evola thinks that whomever can play his or her role the best is the best.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's what aristocracy was supposed to mean, though. Aristocracy literally means in Greek, aristo, which means the best, ocracy, rule. So the rule of the best, which doesn't necessarily mean rule of the family that has everything. It doesn't necessarily mean it means like whoever's the best should rule. So I guess what I'm saying is that's a lot of people misunderstand aristocracy as like there's just a wealthy class and they just get it and they deserve to keep it. Well, not necessarily. If someone can rise up and be better than them, they should overthrow them because they're better than them. That's aristocracy.
And I mean, I do want the best people in place. Same thing, if I go to a car mechanic, I don't know super much about cars. I'm a good driver. I know how to change the wheels, but beyond that, I don't know super much. So if I go to a car mechanic, I don't want an amateur to look at my car. I want a professional car mechanic. When I want the government of a city, I want the best guy at it. I don't want someone who just stumbles in from the street who doesn't really know. I want Aristos, the best in place for whatever capacity. So that also goes into it, like who is the best guy in place for the best job? For some people, they have a very specific job and maybe they're very, very talented. Yes, then they can be put high on top in society and then we get a well-functioning society. I know Singapore, they have a quite interesting model where they actually pay high salaries for, top graduates to go into the government. And in Sweden, we have the politically in place in the police structure. You have individuals who are there from the political side. They haven't been policemen themselves. They're just coming there from the outside via politics. And then you have the opposite of aristocracy. You have someone who's just there, who's been in a political youth party, goes into the party and then jumps on to a different career. So what I want is to have the best person, the one with the most competence in place for whatever he or she is the best at. So it's quite not. And this goes into my take on, you know, everyone being good at what they should be good at as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's fair. I think that's fair. Jason Kukulo, thank you for the $5. Nobility and monarchy are hereditary titles, not based on superior abilities.
So I would say that monarchy, you do have, yes, okay, a monarch is a human, like the monarch has a body and everything like that, like a normal human. He has normal needs and he has to contend with those needs as well. But in his function as a sovereign, he is something more as well. Just as a man can go through different stages in life. When he becomes a father, you gain a certain different connection to the world around you. When you become whatever it might be, and same thing for a monarch, he is not only a person himself, he also has a title and a position and a certain link still with something greater than himself, and that gives him power. I saw a quite interesting account of someone who had seen the Pope, who had actually eye contact with the Pope. I don't know which year it was, but it was quite an interesting story that I memorized because of it. And he said he was full of life by just exchanging a quick gaze. So the Pope looked at him and smiled, like a 1 second thing, but he was full of, like, you know, just joy.
Right.
And he explained it with the fact that the Pope is the subject of so many prayers around the world. He has so much attention going into him. So yes, the Pope, but whichever Pope it was, it's a man. He's riding in his Pope mobile there, he's waving and stuff like that. He's normal man, but he's also so much more. Metaphysical, he's something more.
Sure.
Same thing as a king. A king is an embodiment of a different principle. So that's why I'm 100% I'm for the King of Sweden. Not because the man himself is such extraordinary individual, but because the lineage, the tradition is still there, and what he embodies is something that goes beyond any of us. So it is, you know, he has a superior ability based on his station in life, actually.
So you still have a king in Sweden, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so what exactly is it, a hereditary thing like this person's saying, or
yeah, it is.
Because I mean, history isn't always like that. I mean, in Europe it was for sure, especially medieval Europe, and even right now, as you pointed out. But there's a point in time in the Roman Empire where, for example, Caesar adopts Octavian as his heir. That's not his son. I mean, it's his nephew. It's technically he is kind of like somewhat related through marriage. Fine, but he adopts him because he wants his legacy to move through him. He chose him as the best. This is literally aristocracy. I choose Octavian to be my heir because I think he'll further my project when I'm dead. And he was absolutely right. It was a genius. One of the most genius things ever in history is the story of Caesar and how he won after he was dead. How all of his conspirators are gone within 6 months, and within a couple of years, Brutus and Cassius are dead too. And then Augustus rules this empire for 40 more years until he's 75 years old. And what does he do? He adopts Tiberius. He wanted to give it over to Lucius Caesar, which was his nephew, but Lucius Caesar dies, and then so he has to give it to Tiberius. But it's still the next best up was Tiberius, and Tiberius wasn't his blood son. He adopted Tiberius, and then Tiberius adopts Caligula. And Caligula adopts Claudius, and Claudius adopts Nero. And none of them are sons of each other. These are all adoptions. They're choosing who they want to take over as succeeding. If monarchy was to come back, this is the system I would prefer, where you would have a system that whoever's the chosen one, the representative, the first, the princeps, they call it, the first citizen, would pick somebody who is the best to rule and become the next one. Now that system doesn't always work out very well because, for example, Titus or Vespasian ends up taking over, and then his son Titus ends up taking the next spot, and then Domitian was the next one, and then then you got Marcus Aurelius. Commodus was his son, but you can see like those were the issues come involved when it's hereditary. I think there's some evidence of that. Not always. I think like you probably think Sweden's doing just fine. But I think that's just my personal take on monarchy.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point there. Going back to Julius Evola, he says that the leader in the traditional way also is the one who has the most mana, so magical energy or strongest connection to the divine, what we would in Norse call haminga, also the one with the strongest haminga. And you could definitely make the case that the Roman emperors, they saw, I will give the crown here to whomever I perceive has the strongest saturation of mana in him, or the strongest haminga. And that's a perfectly good system. So absolutely, a strictly hereditary monarchy, it can be completely fatal. Definitely it can. So in my view, of course, there needs to be some sort of continuity. But yeah, if the king can see that this individual will be better than my firstborn son. I mean, Alexander, I don't think Alexander was the firstborn son of Philip either, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he wasn't.
I think,
no. Yeah, there was other
so,
sons.
I mean, there is the case to be made that, and I think Genghis Khan, he had two older sons, and then the third son became his heir. The name escapes me now, getting later, but yeah. So I mean, there's a good, something good if the king can also choose from a pool at least of potential talents. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the most successful in my view of history, but maybe not always, because then you can almost see in that situation that can get out of hand too, because then it's like, then you start to see like bloodbaths for who's the next up. Whereas if you can control it and contain it, then you won't see that. But anyways, yeah, it's fascinating. There's one more super chat here. Jason Cool, thank you for the $5. Station in life. Super inbred Charles PM for Holy Roman Empire with the mind of a 10-year-old. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I said, it can go wrong also.
Yeah, this is an example. The Habsburgs were inbred. Maybe there's some examples of monarchy sort of eating itself, for lack of a better term. So yeah, sure. I think it's all fair points. I don't know. Democracy, though. Democracy, I can see why the founding fathers wanted some sort of democratic or republic. I can see, like, there's a famous saying where it's like, democracy is the worst system besides the rest of them. Like, it's like saying, like, yeah, there's issues with democracy. There's degeneracy. There's uneducated people having a say in the affairs of the state. But it's like, but they'll say, but it's still better than everything else.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that I prefer like the Greek style of democracy, or the Icelandic state of democracy, that you have so in Iceland, for example, they've had democracy for a very long time, for 1,000 years, I think. But the free men, the free property owning men of the land, they come together and they have a stake in the nation. They have a stake in the real consequences for them, what happens during that thing they have, that meeting they have. So they can come together as adult, mature, wise men and give their opinion on something. And I think there's a beauty to that. So I'm not against monarchy. Julius Evola very much is, but I'm not only following Evola on these matters. So I think democracy, it could be a thing of beauty. Then, of course, you can have democracy in a multi-ethnic society. It becomes an ethnic head count. So it doesn't really count. I mean, you can't have democracy in a multi-ethnic society. But in a homogeneous society, I think Aristotle says something about this as well, that can be definitely a suitable option. But there needs to be some criteria as well. You can't just have, like, in some people, they say that 16-year-olds should be able to vote or something like that.
Right,
so
yeah.
maybe like you should be I don't know, have some sort of some
sort of stake on the country that you are serving, rather than like serving the interests of some other state. You want people to know, like, I own land, or I own like this, or like some sort of, like, something that's keeping you interested in the interest of this place. I can see why like the Roman Republic, their system was like, you're represented by a Senate that voted. Not everyone voted, but there was also another sort of plebeian vote on certain issues regarding plebeian affairs. So I can see, like, I think, looking back, like, I think the Roman Republic had the best model for like a democratic sort of state. where you have consuls every 2 years having a lot of power, and then you have like military powers going to what they call the imperator, but they would have to stay outside of the state. Like you couldn't take your legions inside past the Rubicon.
Right,
So
until Caesar did, yeah.
Yeah, until Sulla did first, and then Caesar did it. So it was a precedent already set by Sulla like 20 years before or 30 years before Caesar did it. But yeah, it was a no-no. It was, I mean, I can see why they were doing this. The founding fathers of America are looking at that and going, okay, how do we divide up the power so there's checks and balances? And I can see why it makes a lot of sense. Like there's like a science behind it, you know. It's fascinating. I don't think there's any really true answer to what the best system is, though. They all have ups and downs. They all have their democracy clearly has issues. It's not perfect at all, especially what you just said. And democracy, if everyone doesn't have common interest, it could be a disaster. If everyone who's voting can't stand each other and they all have different common interests, how are you going to vote on things? It's just gridlock. You know? Which makes me think of monarchy having some sort of the benefits of monarchy, where the king can just get things done right now. No passing laws or no Senate agreeing. I want this to be done right now, and it can get done. Snap of the finger, done. So you can see why there's like you can see why both systems are favored in certain situations. Anyways. Any last, I don't know, I'm trying to think of anything else to ask you. What are you working on right now? What do you have coming down the pipeline? Anything like that?
Yeah, so aside from the clothing, so again, I was just in Lithuania, worked on some new products, but yeah, I'm writing on my third book as well. It will be called The Great Remigration, and I will look at historical examples of population transfers, or like remigrations and stuff like that. So I've written a bit about Sri Lanka. Now I will write about the partition of India next. So I'm currently working on it. So hopefully it will be out sometime early next year, depending on how much Odin and the muses they bless me during this autumn, so I can just get that good focus to write. So that's basically my next project. And then I have some videos in the pipeline as well. So yeah, a bit of everything.
Well, man, I'm glad to have you on here for a discussion. So, I think that's it. I mean, I have nothing else to say, and thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I see already like over 2 hours, so probably one of my longest streams ever. But yeah, it's super interesting to talk to you. So, yeah, definitely we can do it again. And thanks for having me on.
I'll have to start reading some more Evola and get caught up to you, so we can have
sure
more deeper discussion on that. Anyways, thanks for your time, and you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The